central role.
That's right. You're one of them 1% Mason characters.
Every now and
You're
then,
one of those insiders.
every now and then on Facebook, Randall, I get accused of being a Freemason. Hancock is a Freemason, as though it explains everything. I know lots of Freemasons. I've spoken in Masonic lodges, but I'm an author and I shouldn't belong to clubs, you know.
I went to a wedding that my friend Duncan Trussel was performing at for these two Satanists in like 2003, and to this day, it was one of the LeVays, Anton LeVay or Stanton LeVay, whatever is his son, and his son got married. This was some young hedonist, you know, and they call themselves Satanists. And so Duncan performed at this wedding, and I went there. To this day, I get fucking tweets about being a Satanist. So I can't join your little club, pal. I can't be one of your Masons.
I need to confess here, Graham.
Yes.
You didn't realize this, but I secretly initiated you.
Oh, my God.
Oh, you're in. How do you get in? How do you secretly initiate somebody? Can you do that for real?
No.
Oh, okay. You scared me.
I sort of did.
Sort of?
Sort
Well, you
of.
could get him in if you wanted to, though, right? If you know the people.
Oh, of course.
There you go.
Even you, Joe.
I don't think so. It's not happening, bro.
Listen,
I met a couple of Masons. They're very cool.
Well, most Masons don't really understand the corpus of symbolism that they're sitting on top of. I got to say that. Not to get off on the Freemasons, but simply
Right.
there's a mass of symbolism. And that's the whole, that's the thing that they're custodians of. And most of them don't have a clue what it means. But they're doing an important job by preserving this corpus of symbolism through the layout of the lodge, the meaning of every component in the lodge, because it's a purely astronomical allegory. And then you have the Masonic carpets, and that's where you have the whole story of the comet, the flood. It's all there. The acacia plant, it's all there.
It's all, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all also an integral part of how Washington, D.C. was designed. Is that true?
Yeah, to some extent. I honestly haven't studied that too much.
What I've seen is that there's a bunch of videos where you could watch it where they sort of describe how the layout, you know, is in some way some sort of sacred geometry.
I think that's
what it's based on.
Freemasons were massively involved in the construction of Washington, as they were of many great cities. The city I live in, England, has got, you know, major Masonic architecture.
So is it like people like me, like my initial prejudice, I hear something like the Masons, like, oh, fucking dude's in a cult, get out of here, leave me alone. Like, we assume that all groups of people that follow anything somehow or another are wacky.
Masons, in my opinion, they're largely a drinking club for men. Mainly, that's what it is.
Guys don't let women in at all.
But you can make special arrangements to bring women into a lodge. For
does
example, my
everybody
wife,
get mad?
when I've given a talk in a lodge, I've given talks in 2 or 3 lodges, been asked to do so. Then they make a special ceremony to allow my wife Santa to come in, because I won't go anywhere without Santa.
I see.
And so women can go in. But then there are others within Masonry who are pursuing deeply esoteric interests and exploring the mysteries, and you can have incredible conversations. In fact, so it's just another group of people who you know are doing their thing. It's not for me. I wouldn't join. I would lose. I think if I joined Freemasonry, it would weaken me as an author. I think I'm better able to comment on these things by not being a member of any such group.
That's interesting. Why do you think that?
Well, because I think I have to remain open to all possibilities, and if I commit myself to a particular line, I don't commit myself to a particular religion. I don't commit myself to a particular men's club either. Which is what Masonry is. I think if I commit that, then ultimately I would become a spokesperson for that, and I don't want to be that.
That makes a lot of sense considering your occupation and how important being open-minded has been to your life.
It's vital. It's absolutely.
Without it, how could you have ever done Fingerprints of the Gods?
I could not.
You would have to. I mean, and the initial thing where you were telling me about Ethiopia, that place where they believe that the Ark of the Covenant lays, which is one of the most bizarre ideas ever. And
that was my first book on a historical mystery, was The Sign and the Seal, A Quest for the Lost Ark.
And when you go into it, like, it's so interesting. But I've always imagined you as a young guy forced to sort of reconcile with this bizarre piece of evidence. You've got these old men that have cataracts in their eyes, like they're around radiation sites, and no one's allowed to go inside and see this thing, and they claim they have the Ark of the Covenant in there, and like, what the fuck is in there? You know, like,
it was the beginning of a
magic.
It was the beginning of a magical journey for me.
It's been a magical journey for all your fans too. For guys like me, man, when I read Fingerprints of the Gods, it was to me, it was one of those books I just couldn't put down, and it was so mind-blowing. And this, again, was in the heart of my fucking aliens, man.
Fingerprints was published in 1995, and Magicians came out in 2015. And I would say in that time, the evidence, when I made the case for a lost civilization and a global cataclysm in Fingerprints of the Gods, I can't begin to account for the amount of hostility and anger and rage that I generated in the academic community. And the idea was considered to be absolutely absurd. 20 years later, with Magicians of the Gods, it's not so absurd anymore. The evidence is mounting. We have incredible evidence now for a global cataclysm in exactly the period that counts, between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. And we have sites like Göbekli Tepe. We have a redefinition of the Sphinx. The whole area is just about to explode in the future. We're on the edge, I believe, of a paradigm shift, and this comet material is central to it.
What I really appreciate about your courage is that you've also had the courage to admit when you've made mistakes.
Yeah.
You don't in any way pretend to be some sort of a bearer of secret knowledge that no one else possesses.
And absolutely not a guru. I don't want to be anything like that. I'm a reporter. That's
Right.
what I am, and I'm a reporter who's reporting on offbeat subjects. And to some extent, I'm an outsider. So one of the talks I do now is about being an outsider. I think there is a place for outsiders in society.
Well, I don't think you're an outsider. I think you're an outsider from the established mainstream ideas. I just think that
Me
ideas
and Randall are the same. We're both outsiders in that area and working in different fields to get into this.
But don't you think that these established channels that were so deeply grooved in distributing information, those things have widened so wide now, where you're getting, a professor could do a podcast. Like he could teach a class, and he could write a book. Or he can do a podcast on a certain subject. And like, you're aware of Dan Carlin and that Hardcore History podcast,
Sure.
which I just can't stop raving about. But what he's done is brought historical, accurate, but really dramatic stories of real events that took place to millions. Like, that's just that no one's doing that. Like but it's not mainstream. Well, what's more mainstream than being #1 on the iTunes podcast list, which he is all the time? What is more mainstream than he must be getting millions of downloads?
It's part of the big change that's taking place in our society. The old structures are being overthrown. They're being thrown away. It's a very uncomfortable time. It's a very uncertain time. It's a very exciting time.
Right.
Because we can build out of this something amazing in the future. The internet's had a huge part to play in it. The fact that people can communicate with one another all around the world.
Well, since I've had a web presence in the last, I was a late comer, but maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I've been getting contacted by, professionals from around the world. I've got probably a dozen major ones. Geologists who want to know more